Welcome back to the program. Glad to have you on board. You want to join the conversation? It's 866-439-5277. Dr. Zuhdi Jasser joins me now, president of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy and the author of A Battle for the Soul of Islam. How you doing, Doc?
Great. It's good to be with you, Lars. Thanks for having me on.
So when Dr. Carson made those comments, we can debate whether or not the left-wing media is going to throw gotchas at Republican candidates, but they do it all the time. And I don't think they'll match them with equivalent gotchas for the likes of Bernie Sanders or Hillary Clinton or Martin O'Malley or the rest. But I just take them as they come. I actually felt that some of his comments resonated with me because I've long felt that Sharia law and those who are devout followers of Islam who stick to its tenets, that's incompatible with the U.S. Constitution. And I was curious to ask you about that and find out what you think.
Well, thanks for giving me the chance to do that. And I'll tell you, for almost 7 years now of an administration that has been an apologist for Islamism and the global threat, it's nice to have this issue addressed. The problem is Dr. Carson, the surgeon, had an opportunity to thread the needle, and it's difficult. It's a needle that's not easy to thread. But if we miss and conflate Islamism, which is a major global movement includes the Muslim Brotherhood, Khomeinists in Iran, the Wahhabis of Saudi Arabia, autocracies throughout the Middle East, that's unraveling world order. But if he conflates the leadership with the citizenry and all Muslims of the faith, it really is this is a very American conflict that Muslims are going through, but we're just in a different time in history. We're fighting against theocracy. So imagine our founding fathers confusing Christians with the theocrats of England and of Europe. So this is the problem, is that he initially said Muslims. Now he's amended and revised his remarks to talk about theocracy and Sharia, which is what he should have done initially. But I agree with you. It wasn't a gotcha, because this is not just about who can be president. It's about who should get security clearances, who should be, what should be our strategy across the Middle East, and who's our friends and who's our allies, not only domestically but abroad.
Let me make a comparison that you might find uncomfortable. I don't think you will personally, but there was an American politician by the name of David Duke who was allied with the KKK. And you don't find a lot of people who are admirers of the KKK. I'm not one. And a lot of people said, I'll never vote for that guy because he allies with the KKK. And what do we find objectionable about them? Because they find the black Americans are not equal to them. They believe that the Jewish Americans should not be treated equitably. And when I look at the followers of Sharia law, and apparently there are some in this country, they believe in the same way that women are not equal to men and won't be treated equally, and that followers of Judaism are not equal, and that in fact would be treated differently. And if somebody can say, because what Carson was asked was, would you support? Not should we prohibit a Muslim from running for president. Would you support a Muslim for president? And you're right. He probably should have tilted it to Sharia, the specific, that specific end of Islam. But, I think I could say that I could give the same answer. I would no more support a Sharia law believing Muslim than I would support a David Duke or a Westboro Baptist Church Christian.
Yeah, and he also was asked whether he felt Islam was compatible with the Constitution. And yes, certainly the leadership of our clerical tradition today are still in the 13th century, and the vast majority of texts of juristic Sharia are incompatible with our republic and our Constitution. However, Muslims that believe and take loyalty to our Constitution, that serve in our armed forces, that would be the source of a solution, just as our founding fathers were the solution to Christian theocracy. If we're going to see Islam as that same time in history, if America doesn't get behind reform-minded Muslims that are anti-Islamist, this is not going to happen, because not only are we talking about 1.6 billion people, but you have the Russias and the Chinas of the world behind the jihadists that helping the evil autocrats of the Middle East. So we have to have a strategy that embraces Muslims as those with the potential to reform, and Islam as a faith with the potential to come to terms with modernity. And that might be a benefit of the doubt that nobody has to give us. But, I think that there's no other strategy that's going to make sense let alone the fact that Article 6 of our Constitution says there shall be no faith test when it comes to political office.
No faith test in the office by the government, but there can be, I mean, you and I both know there were American Christians who didn't vote for Mitt Romney in the last election because he's a follower of the Mormon faith. You know that's true, right, Doc?
Oh, absolutely. But remember, this is somebody running for president of the United States who is the leader, should not be pandering, should not be saying what he thinks the world, the citizenry wants to hear, but rather be the educator-in-chief who wants to teach us about why it's important in today's 21st century, where the greatest threat to our security domestically and abroad is political Islam. And it's not just the obvious ones that are violent or even the ones that are as extreme as the David Dukes of the world, but the ones that appear moderate but yet believe in Sharia, that don't believe in individual rights and human rights and women's rights.
So Doc, how do you sort them out? I mean, how do you know when you're looking at a Nidal Hassan?
The Nidal Hassans of the world, when they start down the path, they start down an allegiance towards an Islamic state, whether it's a figment of their imagination, whatever it is. They believe they're Islamo-patriots who may apologize for it versus Americans like me. We reject all Islamic states, not only ISIS, but all Islamic states. And once you do that, the concepts of jihad, of ummah, of Sharia go away because their oxygen is the allegiance to the Islamic State. And I think that's what a president can do and say, just as our enemy in the evil empire were the Soviets, the evil empire of today is all Islamic states, and if a Muslim rejects the Islamic State, he's our ally. He's a loyal American.
I agree with you, but how do you figure out which one is which? Because our military let Nidal Hassan stay in and rise to the labor. I think he rose to the level of major, and he was in fact protected by his Muslim identification because people who said this guy's talking crazy were routinely ignored until the bullets started flying.
Well, this is why this conversation is just so important, and the precision is important, because we so far, even the reports on Fort Hood didn't mention his name, didn't mention jihad, Islamism, Salafism, all the concepts that we should understand. During the Cold War, we had hundreds of scholars studying Soviet war theory. Today, Sharia war theory, nobody's studying because of political correctness. So if we're going to have a president that's going to lead us to understanding the greatest threat today, which Muslims want to fight, there's so many Muslims that are anti-Islamist that were in the streets of Cairo and Tunisia and in America exist, but can't get two seconds of attention because one side wants to ignore the entire existence of any problem within Islam, which is the left, and certain elements of the right are too non-precise in their language, which alienates Muslims like me from being able to have a role.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. You know what would give me a lot of faith that this will happen, that American Muslims who are not Islamists will reject this? When you see a mosque where people, perhaps the imam, have begun to talk in an Islamist fashion, and you see Muslims say, I'm leaving. I'm leaving this mosque. I will no longer go there. I will not be identified with that. Kind of the way we wish President Obama had stood up in the middle of a Jeremiah Wright, a sermon and said, I'm not listening to this crap anymore, and walked out the door. But I've never heard of that happening in this country, and there have to be mosques out there. You know some of them that are identified as inspiring jihadis. We're up against a break, but Doc, that's the concern I have. Will American Muslims in their own personal daily life going to mosque at some point say, this mosque is too radical, I'm out of here?
Well, the leadership are the problem, and I see this just as American Revolution was started by the laity, the Benjamin Rushes, the Thomas Paines of the world. It's going to start in the laity of the Muslim community, not at the mosques, unfortunately.
I hear you loud and clear. Thanks, Doc.